What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel with another video. Today's topic of discussion will be the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War was a conflict in Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. The war started on the 1st of November of 1955 and it ended with the fall of Saigon on the 30th of April of 1975. It was the second of the Indochina Wars and it was a major conflict in the Cold War. The United States under President Eisenhower entered Vietnam with the principal purpose of preventing a communist takeover of the country. In that respect, they failed because North and South Vietnam united under the communist banner in July of 1976. The neighboring countries of Laos and Cambodia also fell to communism. There were 5 different US presidents over the course of the Vietnam War, including Eisenhower, Truman, Kennedy, Johnson and Nixon. Each president during their presidency expressed doubts in private about America's involvement, but none of them wanted to be blamed for losing Vietnam to the communists. The casualties of the Vietnam War were massive. Estimates of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians killed ranges between 1 and 3 million. In Laos and Cambodia combined, there was a total of more than 300,000 casualties. The US lost over 58,000 US service members over the course of the war. The end of the Vietnam War also meant the end of the Cold War draft in the United States. So now we're gonna listen to a clip from Matt and Shane's secret podcast discussing the Vietnam War. As always, all links to their socials and to their podcast are linked down below, so definitely go and check that out. Now, without further ado, let's get to it.
France dragged us into this to the point that's like, oh, France owned Vietnam. It was a colony. Japan took it when they got a little wild.
Yeah.
And then the United States liberated it.
Okay.
And that was the thing. Ho Chi Minh, the guy who ended up being the leader of the Viet Cong, was like, I love America.
That's right.
He was writing letters to Truman saying like, I love you. Thank you. They were like, Americans are the only free people on earth.
Yes.
These are incredible people. The leader of them loved America.
Yeah.
And then he started, this is the craziest part. So France goes back in after the war and is like, we're taking it back. And America was like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And we were kind of siding with Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese. And then France was like, this is the beginning of the Cold War. So France is like, hey, if you guys don't support us, maybe we'll start listening to fucking Russia. And then America was like, all right, we'll fucking help you out.
Damn.
Anyway.
That is interesting.
The French invaded Vietnam under Napoleon III in July of 1857. The reason for this is that after 1850, there was a rise in French capitalism. This generated the desire amongst the French for a larger share of the Asian territories that were conquered by the West. On the 23rd of September 1945, right after the Second World War, the French returned to Vietnam to take it over again. Their main reason were that French soldiers and officials who were captured by the Japanese when they took over Vietnam were still in the country and they wanted their post back. The French politicians and military officers also wanted their French Empire back, which according to them included Vietnam.
And by the way, speaking of Ho Chi Minh writing letters to Truman, all those letters were redacted and till like 1970 something.
And half of them Truman never got because the Secret Service was like,
wow,
he doesn't need to see these. Yeah,
making those decisions
in
those days. Everybody made, but that's the whole thing about Vietnam too. Everybody's making their own decisions, determining. So the when you have power, when you disperse power in that way, everybody goes, I'll take this part. And they're all just like...
and because of the Cold War, the Secret Service and the CIA were like, this is more important. Like the CIA versus the KGB in Russia and the Soviet Union, that became the 2 superpowers.
Yeah.
And they were doing stuff like undermining the fucking president to be like, the war against Russia is more... I mean, I don't like Vietnam because of how frustrating and stupid it is.
Well, but first of all, the CIA, when you think about it, their whole thing was the Cold War first. So all the drug dealing that happened in the 70s and 80s was again from every cartel. The CIA, when they're like, okay, CIA, they would stop the DEA from doing their job all the time because they're like, the Cold War, these are anti-communists, but they're the heads of the cartels. But they're anti-communists, and that was their priority. So they made that choice, and I'm sure the president didn't want to make the choice, whoever it was during all those times. But that was the choice they always made.
Damn. Then they did the Just Say No like 10 years later. And like, come on, guys, don't do drugs.
Just say no. But even
Yeah.
Just Say No,
So
they were still telling the DEA, back off this guy, back off that guy.
It's so funny.
Because they were saying, look, we think communism is a greater threat. Still, in the late 80s. It's crazy.
They were right. We got a tiny taste of it here, and it's pretty annoying.
Communism does fucking blow.
Good point.
Yeah, they
Especially when the communists are rich and like 30 years old.
Yeah.
and getting DUIs. You see Nancy Pelosi's husband? He's 82 and caught a DUI. Anyway,
Well, I think somebody 82 catching a DUI, I admire that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I mean,
That should be free. That should be like, let you go on that.
All right. We're getting off topic. So,
True.
yeah.
Vietnam, the French. The French are fucking dickheads.
Dude. Brutal.
They were dickheads.
So they dragged us in. They
They absolutely dragged us in.
hid the
Well,
letters.
they dragged us in, but we wanted into. I mean, we could have left. We could have left 10. We could have left. I mean, I read this book, A Bright Shining Light. I just happened to be reading it. By the way, whenever you read a book, especially on Kindle, try to find out how many pages it is. First.
Oh, yeah.
This book's 800 pages. Fuck. So I was reading it like, oh, this is A Bright Shining Light. It doesn't sound like a long book.
Yeah.
It's the history of everything. But France, they left. We helped them. So there was what turned Ho Chi Minh. One of the things that turned him is we decided we supplied France with all these all the mortars and everything where they destroyed a lot of innocent Vietnam, and that turned
Yeah.
them against America too. Ho
Yeah.
Chi Minh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do
It was, there was a battle. I forget the name of it. So I was just
Dien
watching
Bien
the Ken
Phu?
Burns on it. What is it?
Dien Bien Phu.
Yes. So the French were kind of fucking up the Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the same as us versus them. They had
Yeah.
superior firepower. But again, just like time and time again, the Vietnamese were very good at guerrilla warfare because we trained them during World War II.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a little fucking, Mujahideen type shit.
Yeah.
And they were about to come to talks. France and Vietnam, they were about to come to the table. Before they went to have talks, they both tried to get one more offensive in, so they had leverage when they went to talks.
Nice.
So France sets up at, what's it,
Dien Bien Phu, yeah.
They just put themselves at the bottom of this valley, and they're like, we're just going to build an airfield here. We're going to fuck them up. One of the French generals was like, I have too many guns. We're going to fuck these dudes up.
Damn.
And the Vietnamese surrounded them in this valley and just destroyed them. The French guy, the general that led that, killed himself honorably because he was like, we're going to wipe the floor with these guys.
Why'd they
But
go in a valley? Isn't that a bad? I'm not a military tactician, but isn't that like not the good idea?
Yeah, it was a bad idea.
Well, it's funny you say that because even Khe Sanh, the famous 14 years later, America did the same thing. Set themselves up was surrounded by all the mountains, so created a valley and set up an airstrip, a landing strip in the valley, and got killed because of it.
Damn.
It's really amazing. I mean, the other thing about Vietnam is you realize how you always think when you're young, at least, like the people in charge, they spend all their time doing this. They know what they're doing. But there were so many egos involved that the few people who were like, this is not working, they were just like, stop.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're saying. Just because of ego. People think, oh, their
Damn.
motive was they wanted money. They would still get the money. This was about like something else, a power struggle where you pay the price or the troops pay the price.
Now, as for the problems and issues that arose amongst the US military in Vietnam, they included the following. It was said that there was a failure by those in decision-making positions to understand the historical relationship between Vietnam and China, which had been going on for centuries. Also, the high-end US military officials compared Vietnam to the Philippines, where the US forces fought off the communist rebels with success. Therefore, they thought that with the same tactic and mindset, they would get the same results in Vietnam as well, even though they are vastly different countries.
That sucks. Yeah, if you're just some dude sitting in a village and some guy had an argument and you're just getting blown up and you're like, what the fuck is this about?
Oh, and the other thing they had
Some
was
guy couldn't come to grips with it. He was like, no, fuck it, I'm right.
in the early 60s, they had this Hamlet program where they said, we're going to bring all these weapons to each hamlet, all these little hamlets, because it was kind of half and half, like North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought all these weapons to all these hamlets and said, look, you're in charge of the weapons. And it was all American-made modern stuff. And, of course, the Viet Cong, who kind of controlled, more or less, they had the hearts of the people, they took all the weapons. So we supplied the Viet Cong with all these weapons in the early 60s, and it kept them going.
it genuinely makes me like all my information's from the Ken Burns documentary.
Right.
And I watch it, and every time I'm watching it, by episode 2, I'm like, what the fuck is going? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't know if this was in the Ken Burns documentary, but did you see the guy? It is. I think it is. I saw the Ken Burns. Is Beckwith, the guy and an advisor, Colonel Beckwith.
Oh yeah,
Sergeant Charlie Beckwith, and he goes. They interview him, and he go, "What do you think of the Viet Cong?" He goes, "Finest soldiers I've ever seen." This is in 1965. Yeah.
What?
He goes, "What? The Viet Cong?" He goes, "Best soldiers. I wish I had 200 of them under my command." And right away, you're like, "Oh, we should have realized something was up then."
Well, they'd been fighting for 30 years. Mm-hmm. These dudes have been fighting since like World War II. They didn't stop fighting.
Really?
From World War II until the end of Vietnam, they were fighting constantly.
And their home territory.
Yeah.
And they're so small, they had to be crafty. All the tunnels, all the trails, they know everything.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
The Viet Cong are what we call a guerrilla force. With the support of the North Vietnamese army, they fought against the South Vietnamese from the late 1950s until 1975, and against the United States from the early 1960s until 1973. Their tactics were based on hit-and-run attacks rather than fighting in the open field. With the US military using spy planes to find their positions, they decided to go underground. For them, this meant in the most literal way possible. They built enormous systems of underground tunnels, which allowed them to move without being seen. Then, when the time was right, they would strike whenever the odds were in their favor.
You know?
Was that the first American war where like the American troops were like, "What the fuck's going? What's the point of this?" The first
I think
time
Korea, I'm sure they were a little bit like actually.
Yeah, Korea. MacArthur screwed up Korea.
Yeah.
MacArthur. Everybody was like, "Don't do this." MacArthur's like, the people loved him.
Yeah.
The Korean people were like, "This guy's our savior," and he just was like a king over there.
Yeah.
And then he just said, "We're gonna do it this way." I forget. He landed on the coast. So he did something that was strategically a nightmare. And even his generals were like, "Don't do this. What are you doing?" And he goes, "I know what I'm doing." And
that guy, he had a fucking ego, dude.
That stinks.
He referred to himself in the third person.
Did he?
Was fucking nuts. Yeah, he was wild. MacArthur was wild.
That sucks.
He might get a bad rap though. I kind of like him.
Yeah, no, he was beloved. Look, the people loved him because Japan loved him because after World War II, they were expecting, because they were so horrendous during World War II, they expected him to really bear down, and he treated them like, he said, "You treat these people like human beings." So Japanese people treat him like a god. So he felt like a god.
That's tough to shake off. That would get me.
Yeah.
If I was getting like samurai glory, I'd be like, yeah, you know what?
I know. Even
Dudes like presenting you swords and
you
shit.
get to wear one of those cool suits. If I get to wear one of those cool suits, I'm like, who do I? I'll slash
I think that's why God never even let me sell out like the Beacon or something like that. He keeps me at a level of 300 to 400 seats on the road, and there's a reason for it.
Oh man.
So what was it? So chronologically, the French so we were like boys.
So it was a French colony. Then there's World War II.
Yeah.
Japan takes over, and like always when Japan would invade, all the Asian countries were like, "Nice, finally the fucking white colonists are gone.
Yeah,
we're gonna get treated well," and they immediately get starved to death and beheaded and fucked with.
The Japanese forces occupied Vietnam from September 1940 until the end of the Second World War in August of 1945. Simultaneously, Japan had an ongoing war with China that started in 1937. Therefore, Vietnam, south of China, became an important geographical location. The main objective of the Japanese for their invasion of Vietnam was to prevent China from importing arms and fuel through French Indochina.
That sucks.
So then when the Americans liberated Vietnam, and the British, whoever, they were like, "Fuck yeah, we love America." Then France, after World War II, who just got their fucking ass whooped.
Yeah.
They're like, "Actually, we want those colonies back."
Nice.
Yeah.
And, and Vietnam was like, "No. This is ours now.
Yeah.
We're independent again." So then,
do they have to write a letter to Vietnam like, "Hey, buddy,
we're coming back.
Bad news."
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry. We should start chronologically.
Yeah.
Let you. All I watch is fucking Ken Burns.
What? Oh, what are we talking about? Well,
I don't know. Whatever you want.
What you said, and then France, when they lost, you know what I mean, the Geneva talks. I think it was the first Geneva talk back then. Maybe not, but then
that was the best one.
Was that probably
the best one? First Geneva was
we
the
were
best.
like, "Hey, I like Geneva," and then we went in. Eisenhower said, "We're just going to arm them in the 50s. We're just going to keep arming them because we don't want communism to spread down there." And then because China, they were about China taking over Vietnam, but Vietnam wasn't worried because they were half communist. Like you said, by that point, Ho Chi Minh was pro-American until that horrible event where the France destroyed like all these innocent villages, and then he turned on America because we supplied France. They didn't have,
Fair enough.
In Bien Dien Phu,
Bien Bien Phu is when they got cocky.
America started supplying France because the only way the French could get anything was airdrops.
Yeah.
Because they were in a fucking valley getting destroyed. Like 8,000 French dudes died.
Jesus.
Again, though, the Vietnamese lost like 3-1 casualties, but they were like, that's a victory.
Yeah. That's
They
what
would get fucking wiped out constantly.
Yeah, that was. What was that one quote? Like, all we have to do is just stay here and just die.
I mean, yeah.
That was one of the Vietnamese soldiers. Like, all we have to do is just not become extinct, and we win. And I was like,
It's great.
"Yeah, that's tough."
Well, that's
That
the
sucks.
problem with everything, right? I mean, anytime you go anywhere, the people that live there, they have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, you're trapped. A trapped rat is going to fight to the death.
Yeah.
The Viet Cong had some memorable quotes. Here's one of the most famous ones from their leader, Ho Chi Minh. You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and I will win. The Viet Cong also stated that when war comes, even the women must fight.
So
But then, yeah.
it got to the point where they're talking about like the United States was literally funding 80% of the French versus Vietnamese war. We were giving France 80% of the budget to
Damn.
win the war. Yeah.
Yeah.
France sucks.
France did a bad job, and then they left, and then we decided it's such a weird. I look at it so like psychologically, like what I understand about the domino theory was part of it, but
Yeah.
the psychological mindset you put yourself into. There was this guy Harkins, the general. He was the guy that ran it. He is really responsible in many ways because we go back and tell the president and these guys it's going good, but even then, the presidents, the ambassadors, they all went along. It just goes to show. I mean, I quote my mother all the time. I rest her soul, but she used to always say, "People," and I see this deeper and deeper in everything. And this is a perfect example. People are attracted to bullshit, and if you offer them something that's quality or truthful and bullshit, they go for the bullshit every time. And I said to my mother at the time, I go, "That's true most of the time." She goes, "I didn't say most of the time. I said every time." And Vietnam's a perfect example because he was this guy Van. This whole book, Bright Shine Lies, about this guy Van. It was in Vietnam. He was the early guy, and he's like, "Look, we're gonna lose. Here's what's happening. The Hamlets, we're giving away our guns. The communists are taking. We're bombing village. We were search and destroy in 1963."
Jesus.
And he goes, "We're losing everybody. We got to either win them over through like social revolution, the corruption of the South Vietnamese. They're taking everything. Their special forces that we trained are destroying people. This is terrible. We're losing." And everybody, even the people that kind of knew better, just went like, "Oh." And then somebody was like, "No, we're just going to do this." And they're like, "Okay, let's do that." And it wasn't that it was easier. And they almost like willed themselves into like, if you've ever been involved in like a TV or movie project, right? And everyone's sitting there and you start out going, "It's got to be this." And then slowly you start to go, "Oh yeah, no that." And then somebody that wasn't involved in the first month walks in and goes, "Are you guys all gone crazy?" And yes, you have. And
No
that's
one
what
wants
I
to
feel
say
like.
it sucks. They're like, "No, this is good."
You start to believe it.
Yeah.
You get in this stupor. And that's what I think happened in Vietnam with our military.
I mean,
You're on the set of Aquaman 6 and you're like, "This still's good. This is good."
This might
Yes.
be best picture.
And you ever go to a screening of a movie?
No.
And then I've gone to screenings of movies, and you'll sit there and be like, "That movie was really good." If you're around the movie,
Sure,
and
yeah.
you know the cast, you know for the
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
you're like, "It was good, it was bad." And then if I've been with people that go, "Are you crazy? That was shit." And then later I'm like, I was in a state of temporary insanity, and I feel like that's what happened.
Ah.
For
Also,
years.
the domino effect bothers me. It just annoys me.
You don't
It's
like dominoes?
Obviously,
You don't like-
Obviously, I crush dominoes.
No, you don't. I'll tell you, you don't like. You don't like that slippery slope theory. That's basically the domino effect,
Yeah.
right? I agree. I don't
When
like
it when it comes to why we were in Vietnam,
Yeah.
was they were like, well, if China's influence and the Soviet influence gets Vietnam, they're going to get all of Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
and it's like, so
Well, but at the time, Russia had just taken all of Eastern Europe in the early 50s.
The United States justified its military intervention in Vietnam by the domino theory. This theory stated that if one country falls to communism, all of their neighboring countries would follow. The primary example that is being used for the domino effect is in Southeast Asia, with Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia all falling for communism.
All right,
But I'll take Vietnam.
Ah, it's fine now.
What the fuck happened? What happened?
Vietnam?
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It was. Well, I said it was a weird narcotic state where it's been kind of a thing after World War II. It's gone now, but where we're like, no, we don't really fail. Everybody wants this because it works so well. Not just World War II, the Marshall Plan even worked because we're dealing with all these countries and suddenly they're coming back. By 1960s, 50s, Germany's even back. So we're like the benign guys that we control things, but everybody's kind of like getting their thing who wants to be on the team. And then, we didn't realize there was a whole undercurrent. So like the overcurrent is Europe, then the undercurrent is the colonies. So all the colonies were rebelling starting in the late 50s.
Oh, yeah.
From Africa to, South America. And, so there was that whole thing going on,
The vacay spots were popping
There was so much going on. Isn't it weird?
All the sandals.
The sandals resorts.
All the sandals resorts. They've had it up to here.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So it was kind of a weird, it was an interesting time.
I can see communism appealing to that.
Yeah.
You're down
Of
if you
You
course.
gotta
guys
share the fucking daiquiris.
pissing
dude.
around the cheese.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, like Cuba, look at Cuba with the whole mafia thing, and it was such an interesting thing where it was like, they letting all these capitalist things, and then they were like, no, and Castro came in, and you know what I mean? They, even though Cuba failed, they didn't like the corruption level that was going on. The same thing with South Vietnam.
Yeah.
We
That was the thing. We propped up some fucking dumbass.
We propped up a dumbass.
And we would never get rid of it. And then as soon as you saw that part, we were watching it.
Yeah.
We propped up this dude who just immediately started persecuting the Buddhists.
Absolutely.
Started.
Yep.
His wife was a fucking monster who was like, good, I'm glad they're burning themselves.
Yes. His wife and his brother.
Yeah, they were just morons.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we couldn't back off because we were like, it's still better than communism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Ho Chi Minh was kind of.
Ho Chi Minh, also known as Uncle Ho or Uncle, was the leader of the Viet Cong. He was a Vietnamese communist revolutionary, nationalist, and a politician. He served as the Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam from 1945 until 1955, and as its president from 1945 until his death in 1969. He has been credited with his successful campaign to make Vietnam independent, and is seen as one of the most influential communist leaders of the 20th century. He also had a major city named after him, Ho Chi Minh City.
Fucking cool.
Right. He liked us at the beginning.
Yeah,
He
was
wasn't
like,
totally into this thing. And then
Yeah.
It's tough. It's like
but he
assistant-
became,
Yeah, it's like assistant manager.
Now,
energy.
did you know a lot of guys that were in Vietnam?
I knew a few,
Yeah.
I was a kid doing the whole thing,
Yeah.
And I remember as a little kid, you'd watch, it was on the news every day at 5 and 6 o'clock, you'd see the footage from Vietnam. So it was like such a part. It wasn't like I was shocked because I wasn't from the generation before that. That was all I knew. I was 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. But I remember seeing footage of Vietnam all the time on TV and the news, and it was just a constant thing. And I remember one time in class, we were talking about Vietnam. This is probably 71, or maybe 70. And the teacher or the kids were going, yeah, Vietnam is bad. And this girl in our class starts screaming and crying because her brother got killed in Vietnam. And so I knew probably 3 guys, older guys, that didn't hang out with me, but I mean, I knew 3 guys that were Marines in Vietnam that got wounded, that came home, and they all had those cliche Marine personalities. I mean, Vietnam vet personality. The army jacket, by themselves, the big beards when they're home, heavy drinker, heavy smoker, prone to outbursts, but still good guys. Like they were guys we like, they weren't like people hung out with them and talked to them, but they had that other side to them, partly from being in the war, partly from what they did, partly from what Vietnam did, and partly from their reaction when they came home. It wasn't like you walk around, people weren't going, thank you for your service either,
Yikes. That stinks.
Yeah, so I knew a few guys, yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing we were talking about. O'Connor brought this up. We were talking about last night. He's like, imagine today's fucking college student. Imagine
Jesus
being
Christ.
a dude who got drafted and had to go live through fucking hell. And then you get home and one of these fuckers throws like a bag of piss at you and is like, baby killer.
Fuck you.
Like, yeah.
Right. Oh my God.
That's when I would join the Ohio National Guard and I would head down to Kent State and say, fuck you guys.
Yeah, true.
That's yeah. But it was interesting that they all did have that personality.
Yeah.
Even the guys I knew, guy across the street, my friend's brother, was a Vietnam vet that didn't fight. He was a airplane mechanic, and even he was screwed up.
Fucked up from it.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War divided American society. Those who served were often treated as traitors instead of heroes, and they found it difficult to adjust to life back home. Many Vietnam veterans were often left to deal with their trauma alone. It has been said that 10% of the US soldiers returning home from Vietnam has been diagnosed with PTSD, although the number could be higher. Famous politicians John McCain and Al Gore were also in Vietnam. John McCain was a prisoner of war for 5.5 years, until his release on March 14, 1973, along with 108 other prisoners of war. Al Gore was in Vietnam as a war journalist and was honorably discharged after just a few months.
My uncle was a Marine, and he never talks about it.
Wow.
Ever. Like, literally never talks about it. One night, he and I got drunk, and he opened up about it.
Really?
And it was wild. He saw a fucking Chinook get hit and just spun. Dudes flew everywhere. I mean, it was... Now, my other uncle was in Vietnam, and he is a little more... He's a little more sociopath, like, psycho. That's like... I killed a guy. Yeah. And I was like, how was that? And it was just me and him, and he goes... It's fucking incredible. I was like, yo.
I told you, I knew a guy who was a sniper, and he was saying, he's like, you get addicted to the feeling of killing people. And he's like, and he was a nice dude. He's like, I didn't have like ill will towards people, but he's like, I like would watch people eat dinner, and as soon as they finish, right in the head. He's like, by like the 12th one, he's like, you get like a god complex, and you're like, I'm ending this. God done. Damn.
Yeah.
So you just watch people hang out.
The guy in Vietnam. I've told you this before. It was like a 90-degree trail, and you couldn't see around the corner. So he's walking one way. A Viet Cong was walking up the path. He said they literally bumped into each other in the jungle, and then it was just a race to see who could get who could get their gun out faster, and he got his out.
Woo!
Jesus Christ!
Now he's still. I mean, and then he got fucked up. He got hit with a rocket propelled grenade, and he blew. His nipples missing, his calves off. Yeah, and he had to lay there because they're in the middle of a firefight. He had to lay there for 3 hours on the jungle floor like, I'm dead. I'm dying for sure. Yeah. I mean, he's a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and is it that different from war? Like, my father was in Korea, and Korean and war, and he said the most disturbing part was, which is still chilling, that the lieutenants or the officers would nightly bring in the Korean prisoners and beat the living shit out of them, and always like, hey, Brooklyn, you want a piece? And he's like, no, thanks. And they would just like just torture the guys, just beat them for fun. So it was already starting to lose the the glamour of World War II.
The Korean War was fought between North and South Korea. The war began on the 25th of June 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea, and it ended on the 27th of July in 1953. 36,000 U.S. forces were killed in the Korean War. The Korean War was the first war in which African Americans in the United States military served in integrated units.
And then, but Vietnam is a different. Like, I feel like this setup, even though it happened in World War II, it happens in every war. The setup of search and destroy is what fucked them all up. Because here you are, you grow up in the 50s, you're watching these movies, you have a little bit, even if you're not innocent, you know you're capable of. But you're still, and then suddenly you're in the middle of this thing where they go, no, you have to burn all these Hamlets because, like I said, the Hamlet program, the Vietnamese took over the Hamlets. So they go, and the Vietnamese are in there. And whether they are or not, they're in enough where you're like, okay, it's them or me. And so you're torturing all these peasants out of their house, torching their village.
Burning their fucking
that's the strategy.
How long did they do that for? That's our strategy. How long did they do that for?
The whole time.
The whole entire time.
From 1963
down?
Yeah.
From 1963.
Jesus Christ.
And they said that's what Morley Safer was, the guy from 60 Minutes. I always thought, this fucking annoying guy, But meanwhile, he was a reporter, and they filmed in 1965 torching of a Hamlet. 1965, early in the war. And that's when everyone started protesting the Vietnam War. Because they watched on TV, they're like, wait, this is like liberating France. What's going on here? It was just all these peasants running in. They're torching the house and shooting the pigs. Like, that was on the national news.
Jesus.
On the evening news.
That's what you were watching?
Well, I don't remember that, but I'm saying, but people shot the whole country. That's when the protest began.
Because we were the good guys. We were always
you.
the good guys.
But
we were always the good
was
guys.
the news showing it like, check us out? Never like, boo, or like, fuck.
No, the news was like, hey,
this is crazy.
That's because the news was doing their fucking job.
True, yeah.
And they're like, here's what's actually happening.
No, right. They just shot. And Morley Safer had to leave. Like, they were threatening him because they were saying he took it out of context. He didn't, which he probably
he took
did
it
too.
out of context.
Well, I'm saying they weren't saying that they'd been getting shot, like Marines had gotten shot from that village.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm saying it wasn't like, it's not just us evil and everybody else is good either. But I mean,
no, they were bad.
It was a stupid strategy.
But see, this is what happened.
The Vietnam conflict is often referred to as the first television war. The role of the media in the Vietnam War is a subject to controversy, some believing that the media played a large role in the US defeat. They argue that the media's often negative reporting helped undermine the support for the US Army, while at the same time its uncensored coverage provided valuable information for the enemy in Vietnam.
Crazy because the French had just done it before us.
Yes.
So they did this thing called pacification where they were like, they tried to do the social set. Like they were like, we're going to help build your rice paddies up. We're going to give you food. We're going to build schools. And during the day it worked. And then at night the Viet Cong would come in, take the food, take the fucking guns, hide guns in the villages, hide weapons, hide soldiers. So then during the day they'd come back and they'd just keep getting supplies and they'd do raids from the villages with the weapons and shit the French gave them.
Yeah.
And then so the French would come back and be like, we know you're harboring communists.
Oh, Jesus.
And they would burn the fucking village down. Yeah. And then we did that. We did the exact same thing.
And then under the thing of like, we don't want communism to spread, which is funny to be like, we don't want you want to be free, guys. Trust me. And you're like burning villages down. Like, trust me, this is better.
And I think we did the same thing kind of in Afghanistan, right? In Iraq, where it would be like, we're going to give you guys money, work with us, and then the Taliban comes in at night and is like, puts a gun to their head and is like, you work with us.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the whole problem with everything, right?
Yeah.
If you go to some, if the cops go to a neighborhood bar, the only analogy I ever use and everything is a neighborhood bar. And but if they go to a neighborhood bar and go, listen, we want you guys to do a couple of troublemakers in here, and the troublemakers are in there, or they're outside waiting for these guys to leave.
Yeah.
They're not there. They're only going to be there part. They know you're going. You're not there to stay forever. So it always ends up screwing you.
Yeah, and if we don't kill them at night, they're gonna come get fucking beheaded.
Well, isn't that what happened in Vietnam? I mean, once they took over,
exactly,
they Cambodia, all that stuff, they just destroyed. Genocide, got rid of everybody that bugged them. And everybody with a pair of glasses. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
it's like
how'd you get those?
They literally went. Well, just anybody who was sort of fancy themselves intellectual. It was like it's like the army came in and literally just rampaged through Bushwick, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint in the past 3 years.
Nice.
And just said,
hey, everybody
get it. Everybody here who's been to a show at a bookstore, just line up.
Just burn the bookstores.
It's.
The problems with the war in Iraq has been stated by critics as the following: not devoting enough troops to the missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, not adequately planning for post-invasion Iraq, and for permitting and perpetrating widespread human rights abuses. As Americans look back on the war in Iraq, 62% of them said it was not worth fighting. Majorities of the military veterans, including those who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, came to the same conclusion. This holds a very similar mindset as the backlash that the US government received after the Vietnam War.
I mean, that's the thing that's why I never really got into Vietnam. I like the Civil War and World War II, where it's like, it's kind of noble.
Right. It seems
and then Vietnam is the first one that's like,
well, it's so, but even Korea was like a harbinger. It's all like
Korea,
so psychological, right? Yeah. And another uncle who fought in World War II and fought with Audie Murphy. Do you know who Audie Murphy was?
No, who's that?
He's the most famous World War II hero.
Okay.
Like they made him a movie star. He wasn't a good actor, but he was this legendary World War II. My uncle happened to be in his unit.
Oh, wow.
And he said that all the hype, to show you the difference in the war, all the hype about him was true. He goes, this guy was the bravest. He goes, he was so crazy. He'd run right into battle.
Yeah.
They were at Anzio. They were at Battle of the Bulge. All these places. He goes, he would just run right into battle.
He's nuts.
and in those days, they'd celebrate. Now,
like, man, that's a hero.
Even any movie about Iraq, there's still an undertone of darkness. All the World War II movies, they're like, hey, there's no problem here.
Yeah. Kick their ass.
Yeah, like
That's
this guy's
funny.
great. You know, it had like a positive
Like
tone to it.
John Basilone. You know
What's
guy?
that?
He was in the Pacific. There's a rest stop in New Jersey, like one of the first rest stops. That's what he got out of it.
Oh,
He got the Medal of Honor.
That's awesome.
He fucking, it's in the Pacific, and like he goes wild, picks up his gun without the fucking
right.
heat pad, just mows down the jet, and then he goes home. So they put him on a USO tour
Yeah.
to sell fucking bonds,
Yeah.
and he's like, no, I need to go back and fight.
Yeah.
So then he goes to Iwo Jima and is like, I'm gonna do that gun thing again,
What?
and he died.
Oh no.
Yeah, he
Bust out the
died,
trick.
but he got
Yeah, boy, like
was
he
a-
does a strike choice. Yeah.
yeah, he fucking
Yeah, my
But
mom's
he got
cousin
a
did
rest
3
stop.
tours in Vietnam. He
Really?
did one, and he's like, send me back. He did another, and he's
Whoa.
like, give me one more.
Who did it?
My mom's cousin.
Wow.
He did
3
He
tours?
did 2 more. He
3. Wow.
did 3. Because he was like, fuck it, I'm not going back. I'm gonna
And what did
stay
he
here.
end up doing after the war?
I saw him like spazzing, fighting an arcade owner at the boardwalk one time.
that was
Oh.
Charlie.
Good man. He's a
that
good
was
man.
Charlie, dude.
Dude, he was.
But that's the whole point. Yeah.
He was with my mom the one time when they were younger, and he was sleeping in the car, and some guy like screamed something at my mom, and he like popped up and just got out and beat the shit out. They were in traffic on the highway.
Yeah,
He beat the
sure.
shit out of the guy and throw him on the side of the road. And he's like, "Come on, let's go."
Imagine that guy. He sees a woman in a car. He's like, "Fuck you."
The guy
Then the guy
sits up.
pops up.
Yeah, dude, just pops
That's
up.
a Vietnam.
Yeah,
Fresh from
Vietnam.
3 tours. I think it was like 74. Just pops up like what?
Can you imagine 3 tours? I mean, I mean, 2 tours is crazy, but at least you feel like during the second tour, the guy's like, fuck, what did I say yesterday?
Yeah,
But if you go for 3, that means you're like in all the way.
Yeah.
that's when I told the guy, the dude I was talking to, was my ex-father-in-law. I was talking to him. I was telling him about my mom's cousin. He's like, "Oh, that guy just likes killing people."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Maybe."
I mean, he probably just. There's also the guys.
Everyone's
that
got their thing.
You go there. True. You go there, and then you go home, and you're like, I can't be home
Mm-mm.
after.
Yeah.
You're just in the fucking jungle
Yeah.
killing
Yes.
people. Now you got to go pretend to be a human.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
when you get off the road for a long.
The term post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, was invented after the Vietnam War when studying soldiers returning home. Even today, it can be seen how these men are affected, and some of them are still struggling today. In a research performed by Yale Institute, they studied a group of veterans who suffered from PTSD. It was said that the men had a weary look that came from years of shooting up heroin, drinking and smoking too much, gambling, divorces, homelessness, and unemployment. More than 40 years later, they are still paying the price.
Yeah.
Say it happens to cops.
really
It happens to cops to a lesser
Did it
degree.
with a friend. Was that? Yeah.
It happens to cops too.
Yes.
They get addicted to that adrenalized state and they go home. They're like, "This sucks,"
Sure.
and they stay there forever.
And
Get fat.
but the other thing with Vietnam, which I've watched a lot of those YouTube guys where they interview, and you see the similarities in them eventually. And one of them is that they said they got screwed. First of all, just imagine this: supposedly the country sending all this money for aid. Several of them said the sea rations were terrible. He goes, we looked at the date on some of them. They were Korean and World War II.
Yikes!
That's how old the sea rations
Yeah.
were.
Jesus.
That they given to the troops at supposedly the richest time in our history. And the other one is the M14. They said the M16 got more guys killed when they switched to the M16 because Westmoreland wanted, or one of these guys it was like a vanity project. The M14 wouldn't jam in the mud. The
Oh, I did hear
M16
that, yeah.
jammed, and they said guys would just be getting killed, bayoneted to death
Oh,
because it would
Christ.
jam and you couldn't unjam it.
Oh fuck!
And the M14 was the early gun was better.
That sucks.
Yeah. America really fucked up. I don't like it.
But yeah,
The whole thing. Just
whole thing was
bums
just-
me out.
yeah,
And then each president had an opportunity to fucking end it,
yeah, that's right.
and they all just keep fucking dragging it out.
But that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying about that
Yeah.
state. Kennedy.
Yeah, he was close to ending it.
He was, but he
Yeah.
wasn't.
Well, they
You know what I
they
mean?
made
Like-
sure he didn't.
And they said, and this guy Van was talking to Henry Cabot Lodge, who was the ambassador, all the guys who were close to Kennedy. And it was just one of those things where it's like, just at the last minute, it's like any other decision you've seen in any power person, where you're like, everybody has this logical argument, and then they go, no, I think this is better.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Why? You don't even.
It was said that President John F. Kennedy on October 2nd of 1963 ordered for a phased withdrawal from Vietnam, starting with 1,000 US personnel returning home by the end of 1963, and gradually returning soldiers home, with the withdrawal from Vietnam being complete by the end of 1965. However, JFK was assassinated before any of this could happen on November 22nd of 1963.
He give us a reason, and he never give us a reason.
There was
there any kind of economic advantage that like was clear?
I don't think so.
Really? They didn't
I don't
even like
think there was
make
any-
any. Yeah, I guess there was nothing really there.
I mean, there was
Babes,
rubber. No, there was
babes.
rubber.
Babes.
Yeah.
All the shit that was there was gone when we left.
True.
Yeah.
Rubber, coconuts, all the rice. It was all gone. I mean, we fucking killed it.
Damn, that sucks.
I mean, Agent Orange. I mean, when you think about it.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Agent Orange killing all the people. They said their levels of whatever dioxin were 3 times anybody else by the time we left. And all the troops. I mean, doing it to your own troops is just crazy. I mean, that's the height of like immorality, you know, to just
yeah.
the guys that are there fighting and you're just like, yeah, well, you know, it's like, no, they're the ones you have to really try to be a little more careful with, the opposite of what you're doing. It was really a weird situation, you know.
Also, the French were using napalm too.
They were before us?
Yeah, they were. We did everything they did.
Sounds like a French
the
word.
Exact
Napalm.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
Yeah, that
Napalm's
fucking
just
was
gel.
Yeah, isn't it like petroleum gel and they light it on fire and you
Yeah.
spread it if you like touch it.
You
put
don't
water
have
on
to
it.
light on fire. It just goes on your body. It burns.
Yeesh. And water makes it worse, right? Because if you take a
Yes,
grease fire, put water
right.
on it, it gets worse. Yeah, it stinks. And I mean, but France really wanted Vietnam, so
Well,
They
they
loved
had it
it.
before that.
Yeah.
they wanted it back. I mean, they had it, they lost it. They're like, I think we can get this back.
They want their baby back.
Started
But
spreading
what
some
is-
fire on people.
Yeah, what is it
Oh.
about Vietnam that's so? Because we apparently wanted it too. We went in there in the mid-50s and we couldn't leave. You ever go to a party and you're like, I gotta leave. This party's over,
Oh yeah.
and it's like,
It's
and
like, you know what?
you
Yeah, I
gotta
guess
get
I will
up.
do some coke.
You're saying it
I
was
guess
2
I will
a.m. It was
live
2
here.
And
a.m.
you
in
end up going. If
Vietnam.
only I had left at 11 o'clock like I planned to.
France was originally interested in Vietnam to expand its empire and to get a piece of the big pie that was colonial Asia, fighting for their valuable resources against the civilians of Vietnam and for other colonial powers like the British and the Dutch. The USA motivation, however, was very different. America was afraid that communism would spread to South Vietnam and then the rest of Asia. It therefore decided to send money, supplies, and military advisors to help the South Vietnam government.
That's Vietnam.
This probably is just a psychological thing. It's like you want to be the best general. You start losing. You're like, fuck. We got this. And it's like, no. We should have this. Hear me out. This is my passion project.
Yeah.
This is my baby.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. Everybody was just about, you know, the military, like their job is to get more money for the military.
Mhm.
How can you get more money if you're not in a war, you know?
So how did what do you like? How does this thing progress? What do you?
Yeah.
How does it end? What's going on?
Vietnam?
Yeah.
I mean, look, it ended when we left. It was the most, it was really, they're lucky it was the mid-70s. It was like 75, that famous rooftop
Yeah,
thing.
Saigon. Yeah.
They're lucky because by then, everybody was, it was like the age of apathy when I was a teenager. People were just into drugs, you know, dancing, and, you know, it was just a very hedonistic time. People were done, all the protesting that happened in the 60s, people were done by the 70s. You know what I mean? And they're just like, yeah. And so when people left, there wasn't even outrage. It was like, oh, that was awkward.
That
you
was
know?
a bomber.
That was
Damn.
just, yeah, people were just like, whoa.
Yeah.
It just
Coke and
looked so bad.
disco, yeah.
And you feel bad for all the
fuck it.
people that, you know, all the
Yikes.
Vietnamese that were still helping us by the end were fucked.
Yeah. Like that
They got
famous
killed.
that helicopter on the roof.
The helicopter.
That picture. That's a long line.
Yeah,
And that's the last chopper.
that's right.
Those boys
Last
are
shot.
staying, and that's
That's
a
right.
fucking negative time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When that
they-
chopper takes off and you're like next in line, like fuck.
I've
Should've
had
got
that.
here
I've had a
5
similar
minutes
experience.
earlier.
I was at Longwood Gardens waiting for a shuttle to like go see the shuttles. Like I was like the last guy. I had to wait like 15 more minutes. I was like, motherfucker.
Yeah,
I
I know that.
don't know what happened. It settled down. It's better now.
No, it's not.
That's not tearing. The damage is done.
I mean, that's the thing. The power shift immediately,
Yeah.
and all the people, like when you think about the people right now in your life that you were like, fuck you, and then if suddenly they're in power, they go, where is this son of a bitch? Astoria? Where does he live again?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you just hope they, you know,
Well,
accidentally mistake you for Mike Feeney and kill him.
yeah, but what's it like? So you grew up watching Vietnam, and
Yeah.
then what was it like for you to see like the Iraq War and all? Because the older I get, the more I'm like, I already saw this before.
I believed that there were weapons of mass destruction.
They got you too.
They got me. I believed it all the way. I said, there's got to be weapons of mass destruction. It wouldn't be this, you know, they wouldn't be going to this extreme after Vietnam.
They wouldn't be
if it
our
wasn't
leaders
true.
Oh.
They're not going to be fooled twice.
Wouldn't be this diabolical.
I said they can't be that stupid. or diabolical. Either way, I said there's no way there's not weapons of mass destruction.
There wasn't.
I mean, I was a kid.
Me and the Senate believed this.
Yeah, you and Hillary Clinton.
All of us, yeah. Only a few didn't.
I was a kid, and it was 2003.
Yeah.
So I was fresh off 9/11. I was an 8th grade fucking patriot.
I had a bone to pick. Yeah.
I was pretty much a troop at this point.
I had you.
4 years later, I'd be going to West Point.
Yeah, they had you.
I was ready.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Vietnam,
my seat up.
Iraq, I was pumped. I was watching you remember when you watched the news?
I like the fact that he thinks you get into West Point. That's a hard school to get into.
I got in.
He was in.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm very impressed. You did?
Yeah, well, I quit right away, but I went.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah.
What do you have to get on your...
The war in Afghanistan took place from 2001 until 2021 in a direct response of the attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. The Iraq War was from 2003 until 2011. Reasons for the United States to invade Iraq and Afghanistan are the following. Allegations of Iraqi support to terrorist organizations, along with Iraq's alleged development of weapons of mass destruction, and the supposed link between Saddam Hussein's government and terrorist organizations, in particular Al-Qaeda, who were responsible for the attacks on 9/11. Eventually, there were no weapons of mass destruction found in either Afghanistan or Iraq.
Fucking SATs to get into a place like that?
I played football. That helped.
Oh.
Yeah, they got me in for that.
You know what's interesting about Vietnam, which I realized we all had army jackets in the mid-'70s, early 70s to mid-'70s. Everybody wore Vietnam the green army jacket. Like that was the biggest style. And it was Vietnam vet. It was Vietnam clothes. So even though nobody really welcomed them home, that was a really important part of the style.
That's funny because people dress like construction workers now here.
Yeah.
So that's right. Like, yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, you dress like somebody who works harder than you.
True.
That's right. But yeah.
So did you get to witness like dudes coming home and getting kind of treated like shit?
No, but I definitely, like I said, in class, that girl's brother guy.
Yeah.
And like I said, I knew the Vietnam vets, but they didn't get treated like shit in my neighborhood. I mean, but because everybody's like, oh, I went to Vietnam. It was
it's fucked up.
It was a consequential thing. I think it was mostly like at protests or at the airports. But I mean, in general,
was it looked at as kind of like a shame? Like you went to
no, not a shame, but there was something like it was a serious. Like everybody knew, like these guys went through something that was a little different from like World War II and stuff.
That's how it is.
And they had long hair, so even the patriotic people were like, "This guy's like
oh fuck,
because they had long hair." But they were they were great guys. I mean, some of them were really. Yeah, great guys, Like they weren't that fucked up, but they get wasted at night. But everybody in those days it was different. Like they weren't like, oh, that guy drinks because he's a Vietnam vet. People were getting fucked up all the time. Yeah, everybody was smoking weed. Everybody had long hair. Everybody had army jackets, and everybody was just kind of insane. So it was
sounds awesome.
Yeah,
it was kind of awesome. But so there was something different, at least around then at that time.
I need to bring it back.
But
I'll bring it back.
I need to get way more militant in my weed smoking. Army jacket. I'm fucking up right now.
It's funny to be fucked up and smoking weed. Like
it is, yeah.
You're like, I'm just dark.
The Vietnam War severely damaged the U.S. economy. Unwilling to raise taxes for the war, President Johnson set in motion a cycle of inflation. The war also weakened U.S. military morale and undermined for a time the U.S. commitment to internationalism. The war sparked an era of distrust, paranoia, and cynicism among U.S. artists. A big example of this are the protest ballads by Bob Dylan. The Vietnam War also directly correlated with the rise of the hippie culture in the Western world, but most notably in the United States.
I need to be like...
It is weird that our biology rejects burning villages on some level. If you do it, it fucks you up.
It's tough coming back.
Oh my God. But I mean, the tragedy is that that was literally the strategy that they were told to do.
Yeah.
So what does that do to you? You're listening to the people that you don't make those decisions. It's a chain of command.
Yeah.
And they're saying burn the villages.
You can't really half-ass it, really. It's
my God. I read a horrible book. It was just guys that had done atrocities in Vietnam. It was just an oral history from guys that have done things in Vietnam. And I'll tell you, I remember one quote somebody said, "You'll never be surprised. You're going to be shocked." Some guy was talking to some other reporter or somebody who was going over there, and he goes, You're going to be shocked at the cruelty of a 19-year-old American boy, and what they'll be capable of by the time they leave.
I mean, that's
and the guy
thing.
goes, "That's what happened." Yeah,
that's the thing. Every one of these wars, every one of these atrocities is 19-year-old, 20-year-old boys with they've been killing people for a year.
Sure.
They're gonna go wild.
Yeah, once one of your friends gets shot, it's like, all right, well, fuck
Yeah,
this.
we'd be the same fucking way.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I mean, to varying degrees. Some people would love it more than other people. We'd all be the same way.
Yeah, you would love it.
What, war?
Yeah, no, committing atrocities.
Yeah, right. I'd hate it.
You would be the
I'd hate it.
worst.
Fuck me up. I'd be in a long hair and a jacket so quick. Just what the fuck's going on? Yeah, I don't know. That would be. I mean, you know, because there's like, I think they just gas you up enough to get you over there, and then it's like your friend gets shot.
Or you get
then
fucking
it's just like,
drafted, dude.
True. Yeah.
Think of that. You
Forgot
get
about
fucking
that.
drafted into that. You're just.
Yeah, you're in college. Like, even the guys who just were like, I decided to drop out for one semester. They go, the minute I dropped out, they got me. Like, they were watching people to make sure the minute they got him, they're like, get that fucking guy. They're probably like finding out their grades are like, and get this, he's going to drop out.
Yeah, he's not going to do anything.
My uncle played basketball just to get out of it. He played basketball at Westchester to get out of it.
Really?
I think, yeah.
Who did?
My Uncle Jack. He was like, he was of the perfect age to get drafted, and he just hooped it up.
My dad graduated college or high school in '74.
Mm-hmm.
So he got a draft card, but he was.
My dad was too.
I always make fun of him for being a draft out.
He got a draft.
He got a draft card. He didn't get drafted. But
yeah, 74.
The war ended.
People were trying to get out of there.
Yeah.
The war ended, but it was funny it's fun to make fun
He
of.
probably got the last year of the draft. The draft probably ended in 75.
It must have been so nice.
And you see,
So
like,
it was cool. It was cool to be anti-war when you were young.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that was like the hip thing.
Oh, so you're saying like the sanctioned station shows were just kind of
Yeah, like most of, you knew like they were squares, even though we were little kids. We knew they were squares.
So the shows of that time were supporting a horrific war and like a horrific kind
But
of
they weren't really
government thing.
supporting it, but you just kind of knew that was like the way it was in some weird way. You could sense like that was it.
There was a school bus driver that was a Vietnam guy.
Really?
And he was fired. He would get fucking fired.
That's a good bus driver.
Screaming at people.
That's a good bus driver.
Yeah. That is a good bus driver.
North Vietnamese soldiers brutally and systematically tortured American prisoners. They did this to force them to confess to war crimes or to get military information. Vietnamese civilians were often subjected to shocking violence during the war. Soldiers raped, mutilated, shot and murdered civilians. Troops also intentionally destroyed villages well beyond the destruction that is typical for war. 34% of the US soldiers used heroin in Vietnam, and 20% of them were said to be dependent on it. The average age of US soldiers in the Vietnam War was 22 years old. This was in a big part because of the draft. It was said that as much as 2/3 of the Army and the Marines were drafted. Today, Vietnam is a socialist republic with a one-party system, led by the Communist Party. So that was all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And as always, I got all links to Man and Shin's Secret Podcast and their social down below. So please go and check that out and show them some love.